Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Celebrating Tide in Scotland Learning Legacy event, and a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for coming along this afternoon. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Amanda McCarran and I am the Head of Development and also the National Lead for Tide in Scotland, and it's been my immense privilege to lead the team in Scotland over the last 4 years as we began to establish Tide and grow the network in Scotland. And that's the reason why we're having this event today. Throughout the last 4 years, we have been funded by the Life Changes Trust to establish and grow Tide in Scotland, and we're now coming to the end of that funding. And we're also coinciding that with the publication of our evaluation of the last 4 years of Tide in Scotland. And that's why we wanted to come together today to celebrate everything that we've achieved so far in Scotland and give some of our carer members an opportunity to tell you exactly why they joined Tide and how much of an impact it's had on their lives too. I'm just going to go through a few quick points of housekeeping just to explain how the event's going to go today. We're doing this in a typical webinar style format. So for those of you in the audience, you will not be able to see yourselves on camera or on screen at any time, and you also won't be able to interact with us through your microphone. So the best way to either ask any questions or give us any comments is to use the chat function. So if you see on the bottom bar of the screen, you'll see the little chat box. It's like a little speech bubble. If you just click in there, you can add in any comments and any questions throughout today's event. We will be having a live panel session in the second half of today's event where some of our carer members from Tide will be available to answer any questions about what they've presented on or spoken about today so far. So if you can think about if there's any questions that you would like to ask them or any comments you'd like to make on some of the things that they've been speaking about, then please feel free to do so in the chat box. That would be great. We are going to have a short break halfway through today's event, so that'll be coming round about just before 2 o'clock, and that'll give everyone around about 10 minutes just to stretch your legs, get some refreshments, attend to anything that you need to do, and just give you a little bit of a break from the screen for a while. Okay, so as I said, this is about our evaluation of Tide in Scotland, and we commissioned our evaluation partner, who was the University of the West of Scotland, and they were vital in partnering up with us since 2018. And over the last few years, they've been interacting with Tide staff and Tide carer members to see exactly what Tide was doing for them, and also to measure the impact and how we were measuring up against the outcomes that we had for Tide in Scotland. And so we're officially launching our evaluation report today. You'll see on screen there, that's what the report looks like, and it's now available on our website. And it will be, in the chat box, there'll be a link to the website. So if you click on this link, or if you visit our website at any time, you'll be able to download a copy of the evaluation. And I'd really urge you to do that because it's full of lots of case studies from carer members and also testimonies from different partners that we work with. And also just kind of looking back over all the different highlights and achievements that we've managed to do with the network in Scotland over the last 4 years. So it's available there for you anytime. A couple of things I just wanted to pick up on around about the evaluation when looking through the highlights of what the partners found. There was a couple of things that stood out to me that we really want to celebrate today. And the first one is that there was an overwhelming feedback from carers that they valued being members of Tide, and that also being a member of Tide can be life-changing for many of them in many ways, and that was really great to hear. It was also really great to hear from a lot of our key partners and stakeholders who we've worked with over the last 4 years, who told us that they felt very much that Tide was needed in Scotland and that its presence here was very helpful and very supportive to carers and former carers of people with dementia. And that was also really great to hear because part of our work and part of the foundation of building the network over the 4 years was those relationships, both with our carer members and also with those partners and stakeholders externally as well. And the kind of 3 main outcomes that our evaluation focused on and that we aimed to achieve over the last 4 years was, first of all, connection. So we aimed to connect people. That's why we developed a kind of network model. We wanted to connect carers and former carers across all of Scotland and, again, the rest of the UK, linking in with the other aspects of our Tide network. And we really just wanted to give everyone that level of peer support where they could come along and find people who understood what they were going through, who had experienced similar issues, similar experiences, and they could really find people who understood where they were coming from. And that was really key. And it also helped to build up confidence and also levels of self-esteem in carers as well, by realising they weren't on their own, and hopefully make them feel less isolated and less on their own. The next really key outcome for us was about investment, and that was not only investment in carers through our carer development programme and the support that the staff gave in terms of training and preparing for events or activities. We really hoped there we could help carers to either regain skills they may have lost or achieve new skills, and again build that confidence and give them new purpose and new passions to work on based on their experiences of caring for somebody with dementia. But apart from that as well, we also looked at the investment of time, and that's a really key one for us, and hopefully that comes through both today and in the evaluation report, that the staff members and also the carers themselves invested a lot of time in each other and in supporting the network and what we did. And especially when you're thinking about that from a carer's perspective, that time is a hugely valuable and very scarce commodity for people who are caring. So we really appreciate and value and acknowledge and recognise that carers were willing to give us that time and invest that time and tide to help us achieve what we've achieved. And finally, our last outcome that we are hoping to have evidenced today in our evaluation report was about how the carers can influence. So once they've made that connection and built up those skills and the confidence, what can they do with that? How can they influence, whether that would be with other carers in a peer-to-peer capacity, whether it would be at a local level with services and the way that dementia is commissioned by local authorities or local carer centres. And then right up to that national level. So we've had a lot of seats around many tables at government level where our carers have been able to influence on policy, practice, research, education. And it's been really fantastic to be alongside, and really a privilege for me and all the staff at Tide to be alongside our carers throughout the last 4 years and seeing them grow and blossom and really achieve huge things and really help to change the way that dementia is viewed, the way that caring is viewed, and really try to make some positive changes for carers that are coming behind them, because that's the main thing that most of our carers will say, is that they don't want other people to experience the same things that they have, and they want to change it for the people that are going to come behind them, and that's hopefully what they've been able to do. So we're going to move on now to hearing from our current chair of our board of trustees, and also she's one of the founding members of Tide, and her name's Ruth. And I conducted a small interview with her last week, and we've recorded that, and we're going to play that for you now, as Ruth reflects back along Tide's journey from the very beginning and right through to coming to Scotland and what we've done in Scotland so far. So here's Ruth's video. Can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a bit about your role in Tide?
Sure. Well, I'm Ruth Ely, and I'm a founder director of Tide. I took over as chair from Jean Totty in April this year. She was also one of our original directors. So she'd laid the foundation for the work.
And can you also tell me a little bit about the background to Tide and how it all began?
Well, Tide started as an idea out of that grew out of the lived experiences of directors and staff in the Life Story Network. Jean herself was a carer at the time. Her father since died, and she chaired a group called United Carers for Dementia. And in that role, she campaigned successfully for the National Dementia Action Alliance in England to run a carers call to action. And that ran from October 2013 to March 2015. And what that did was demonstrate the need for an involvement network for carers and former carers of people with dementia. The idea being to connect people together and to give them skills and confidence so that they felt able to speak up and try and influence change. In the discussions about the legacy from the call to action, Life Story Network put their hands up and said, well, we'll take this on, we'll make something of it. And we were able to get some development money from the Department of Health in England and from the Alzheimer's Society. And eventually we were able to get substantial grant funding, both from the Big Lottery and from the Life Changes Trust. And And in doing that work and getting that funding, our branding and our mission and our values were all developed with carers and former carers.
And so for you, why is Tide important and needed for carers and former carers?
Well, as far as we know, and people tell us this, Tide is unique in a couple of ways. First of all, lots of organisations support carers in their caring role in Scotland as well as in the rest of the UK. The difference is that we invest in carers through our carers development programme. So, as I said before, we give them knowledge, skills and confidence so that they can use their voice in whatever way suits them best. So, for example, some carers enjoy standing up and speaking at a conference. Some are good at writing, so they might write a blog. Some might want to get involved locally to try and improve services. Quite a lot of carers and former carers get involved in research, both in terms of designing and shaping the research, but also as research participants. And some trainers also deliver training with us. So I ran a workshop a couple of months ago with some clinical psychology students, and a really important part of that was 2 carers telling their stories. And that's far more powerful than me telling their story on their behalf. So that always goes down well. We always get very positive feedback. We're also unique, I think, because we make sure that we provide support both before and after an involvement activity. We would never ask a carer to stand up and speak at a conference without helping them prepare, offering support and debriefing them afterwards, because telling your story to other people, especially in a high profile event, can be a very emotive experience, and people do need to be able to debrief from that.
And so what led Tide to coming to Scotland?
Well, the big lottery grant enabled us to develop in England, so we were keen to explore opportunities in Scotland, and we had some initial discussions with the Life Changes Trust. They were encouraging, so we submitted a bid, and we were absolutely delighted when that was successful in 2017. We saw great opportunities here.
Yeah. And so what do you think have been some of the biggest impacts that Tide's had in Scotland?
I think we managed to combine developing our direct work with carers through our development programme with forging links and getting a seat at the table at a strategic level with Scottish Government and with partner agencies. And a lot of credit goes to you, Amanda, for that, because you've worked really hard to raise our profile across the country. So our carers' voices are represented in various national forums. They've contributed to cross-party groups. They've spoken at conferences and workshops, and their experiences have helped us develop our living grief and bereavement and our restoring relationships toolkits, which were funded by the Scottish Government. So I think we've done really well in getting Tide embedded in the psyche of the dementia world in Scotland, and we're much better known, and we are asked to do work, and we're asked for our advice and our expertise.
And how do you feel yourself about the achievements and progress that Tide's made in Scotland since it started here 4 years ago?
I think it's been amazing. I think the progress is phenomenal, really. We've had such a strong and committed staff team, and they've really both demonstrated the benefits of working with carers as equal partners, but they've actually lived that and acted as role models for how to do it, because a lot of professionals talk about it, but actually doing it is quite a skill. And I think we've demonstrated that it's possible and it can be really effective. And the stories that you're going to hear from carers at these events are great examples of that. You know, they are included, they are alongside us, they are working with us and alongside us. And that's the message that we want to get across to everybody.
And why do you think, or what do you think are the main reasons for our successes in Scotland?
Well, when we started to grow Tide in Scotland, we were very clear that we didn't want to establish Tide as a competitor or to replace or duplicate anything that was already operating here. We believe that what Tide offers complements the work of other agencies. So we've always been very clear that we want to work in partnership. And I think we've managed to strike the right balance. So, like many other organisations as well, of course, we've had to be flexible. We've had to switch to online working, virtual ways. And although the context of having to do that the pandemic and all the consequences that were pretty horrific. Nonetheless, it has enabled us to reach a lot more carers than we could have done previously, and connect them with each other, which is part of our overall objective. So, for example, we've got carers in Wales who talk regularly with carers in Scotland. They wouldn't have been able to do that previously. They might have met once a year, perhaps at an event, but they can now meet weekly or fortnightly or whatever through the various events that we run and facilitate. And I think that's great, and they've really benefited from that. So they can share their experiences with all that involves in terms of mutual support and understanding, but they also pool their ideas, and it's those ideas that we've drawn on to inform our work. So we don't just run a coffee morning as a social event. We use those conversations to inform our work and help us decide on things that we need to campaign about or produce some materials about or talk to other organisations about.
And finally, Ruth, as we finish off here, what are your hopes for Tide, both in Scotland and across the rest of the UK in the future?
Well, I want Tide to flourish and grow. The board is absolutely clear about this. There's a place for Tide. It's important. We fill an important niche. And if we weren't here, there would be a big gap. So times are tough in the charity sector right now, but we know that what we offer is unique, as I said before, and our carer members want us to continue, and our partners value what we do. So as we start to emerge from the pandemic, it's even more important that carers' voices are heard and acted on. People with dementia and carers have been hardest hit in this pandemic, and carers have taken up most of the slack because health and social care services reduced. In some cases, they've disappeared altogether, and carers have stepped in. So they're doing even more now than they were before. And we know that already they're the biggest dementia carer workforce. So their stories must be told and their stories must be heard, and we want to make sure that we do both.
So thank you to Ruth for recording that interview with me, and also I think I can safely say that Oprah Winfrey's probably sleeping very easily tonight, that I'm not going to take her job off as being an interviewer, but I tried my best. So hopefully that was really informative, and it was good to hear from Ruth as one of the founding members of Tide, who was instrumental in bringing Tide to Scotland, about her reflections over the last 4 years. We're now going to move on to the premiere of a film that we've done with 3 of our carer members. So that's Anne, Norma and David, and they're actually here live today, and they will be our panellists in the panel session after the break today. So they're going to be here for any of you in the audience who want to ask any questions or comment on their film. And it's really showcasing for us that co-production, that partnership working. It's looking at their journey with Tide, how they came to first interact with Tide, and some of the things that they've been able to do, and the impact that Tide has had on them throughout the last year or so that they've been involved with us. And it's really important to hear from the carers themselves, because that's what we're here to do. That's who we're here to support, and hopefully that's also what you will see when you read through the evaluation report, is how much we've been able to help and support carers and former carers who are on our network. And so this is the premiere of the film, and I'm really excited to show it to you today, and really proud of Norma, David and Anne again for being so open and honest about their journeys and what they've gone through, and also just the huge impact that they've had on our team in Scotland and the network as a whole. And so here's their film. Thank you.
My name's Norma, and I live with my husband David, and we both gave up our jobs several years ago to have a bit more time to spend together, to go away on holidays and enjoy after working very hard. But we've actually found we're probably busier than ever now.
I'm David, and I live with Norma, and again, like Norma, I took early retirement from work, really just to get away from the pressure pot and establish a nice quality of life.
I'm Anne. I come from Glasgow. I live on the south side of Glasgow in Kinnan Park. I've been here more years than I care to remember. I'm helping look after my mother-in-law with the help of my husband and carers. I've volunteered for many years with Prince Prince of Wales Hospice, Marie Curie in the past, and also with Tide at the moment, where they're helping me and I'm kind of trying to contribute a little back to give something back to them.
Really, over the last number of years, we've probably helped to care and support for maybe about 4 different relatives between us on both sides of our family. And we were absolutely passionate to give people the best quality of life that was possible to them. We feel now we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise, things that we learned along the way that we'd like to share with people. So Alzheimer's Scotland had contacted us to say there was a webinar with Tide, which we joined in with, and then got to know a bit more about their work and decided that we would like to actually be more involved with Tide, because we like the whole ethos and the aims and objectives of the organisation.
I was a carer for my mother, and that took a 10-year journey with her vascular dementia that then went on to be her heart failure, and things just all went from bad to worse, and it was quite a difficult 10 years in our lives. I learnt about Tide through one of the support workers that works at Alzheimer's Scotland, where I've been heavily involved with for many years. They were very supportive with my mother on her journey with dementia, and Polly, a wonderful person that works there, thought that it'd be really good for me because she heard that Tide was very informative and helpful for carers. I feel that sometimes carers' voices aren't heard, and Tide is very much about listening to the carers and acknowledging the knowledge that we have, the experience we have. And I found them really, it's been the best thing ever. During lockdown, I've only been contributing and working with them for about 8 or 9 months, but it's been really good for me, and I like to think that with some of the presentations and the stories that I've been doing on Zoom, that I'm kind of giving a little bit back as well to help other carers.
What we've found is, although we're former carers, we've been able to offer some guidance and advice and friendship. It's become a very, very close-knit little group. There's bonds of trust, and I think that the folks there and ourselves can share things in that little intimate coffee morning in Zoom. One of the really nice things is that the staff members from Tide have all been involved in caring responsibilities and are still involved in caring responsibilities. It really is just a group of like-minded people trying to share and trying to help each other and trying to lift each other.
We were very fortunate when we were in a caring role that we had each other to bounce off, but I think there are times when people are totally on their own, and I think that can be very difficult. So I think when people are coming together through the Tide Coffee morning or in other situations, there's a sense of relief. Gosh, what I'm experiencing is actually okay. It's normal to feel like that. I'm not the only person that feels like that. And there's a kind of, I suppose, comfort really that actually, although everyone's situation is very different, and I think the care journey for everybody is very different, there are very much common themes that people find difficult. Tide have various webinars on their website that you can link in with, that you can learn from as well, and for people who are currently caring, good hints and tips.
The best thing that I have joined in with so far is the former carers group, which is people from all over the country, and we get together once a month, and it's been amazing just to listen to former carers' stories, which kind of all ties into the same feelings and emotions that you've been going through yourself. As a carer, personally, and I'm sure other carers feel the same, that you lose your identity along with a lot of other things, and you are just kind of left desolate and alone at the end of it. And Tide has been very good at giving myself a voice and listening to all the other carers that have similar feelings and emotions.
For me, it was very much to make that contribution, to provide an active platform where we can actually make a difference to the lifestyle of people who are vulnerable in our country. Where we fit in as members of Tide is to be the people walking the ground, if you like, working and enabling and getting close to people and building friendships, to really offer practical, sound advice, care, support, love along the way to really make that difference, which will hopefully transmit on to better care for their loved ones.
The lovely thing is that I've built up some really nice relationships with some of the girls on the team. Really nice part of a family, and they're so supportive, and it's not all just about dementia and the difficulties with it, and there are many difficulties that we all walk on the journey of dementia, but the good thing is that you feel you're in a big bubble with them, and you feel supported and cared for, and on a one-to-one basis. At any point I've been offered that I could, and I have done it, I've taken them up on it when I'm having a bad day, and I'll give them a call, and they're happy to just spend half an hour, 45 minutes, however long that I need. So it's not just a charity with compartments that help you do things, but they're also very lovely people, and you do feel warmth and love from them.
There's an empowerment in the right way of knowing that actually your lived experience, the good and the bad, and what you've learned, what you've done well and what you could have done better, to actually know that there's a platform there to really influence, to make that better. And people are sometimes dying to tell their story, and there's certainly for us, a passion to continue that, in the person's memory, to make things better, but just because you want the poor stuff that happened along the way not to happen again. And sometimes it's not big things that need to happen, it's just very small things that need to change that could make things so much better.
If we can push enough and say, well, this isn't good enough, this isn't working, we need better, the government needs to do better. So in the longer term, the influence that I've been able to achieve from Tide's voice, they've given me my voice to come on to events like this, and also the other things that I do that's involved Alzheimer's Scotland, Age Scotland, and it means that one day I'd like to think if we make just a tiny little change to something along the way, then it's all been well worth it. Yeah, Tide is different. It's a warmth and a feeling that I didn't have on my journey with my mother. If you're starting out your journey or on your journey with caring, please do try them, because they are very, very nice and very, very helpful.
I think there's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes to try and encourage respect right across the board and trust right across the board, and basically the whole idea that caring is very much a team element. There's the institutional element, there's the government element in terms of providing funding, there's the social work element, there's local authority element, and there's obviously there's the element from the individuals whose responsibility is to care for loved ones. And if that teamwork can be brought together right across the board in a way that Tide are actively promoting, then it will make a difference in time, and it will make a huge difference, and people will benefit from it. And ultimately, that's all we're trying to achieve.
So thank you to our three lovely Tide members there, Anne, Norma and David. And as I said, they're going to be on our live panel session after a short break in a few minutes, and so they'll be available for any questions or comments that you have. And they're really looking forward to interacting with you. So if you can think about anything you'd like to ask them or say to them, if you can pop it in the chat box, that would be really great. And so just before we head into our break, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on my own learning over the last 4 years of leading the team here in Scotland, and also reflecting back on some of the things that both Ruth has talked about, and also some of our members within their film there, what they've spoken about as well, and why I think it's really important to continue doing that work through Tide, and how I hope that other organisations and other support mechanisms for carers do the same type of work. And I think the first thing that I want to say is that when we started to establish the network in Scotland, one of the most important things that I tried to instill in all of our staff members, and also just right across the board in all of our members, was that we wanted them to be honest and open about what had happened to them, what their experiences were and what they were going through. And that was really starkly illustrated to me when I started to begin working with carers in the first few months of Tide in Scotland. And I was going to be doing an event with some carers, and they came to the office at the time in Glasgow to meet with me to prepared them for what they were going to do. And the first question that both of them asked me was, is there anything that Tide does or doesn't want me to say? And I think that was really telling of their previous experiences with organisations, and it really solidified my goal of making sure that we were a safe space for people to come, and gave them that opportunity to be honest and open about how they feel. That's not always an easy journey, and that's why we put in and invest so much time and support in carers to ensure that it is a safe space, and that the benefit of being able to be open and honest with people who are like-minded and who really understand where you're coming from has a huge benefit and a huge impact, and is also, I believe, the only way will really affect proper change and sustainable change. Because if we pretend that things don't happen and we continue to pretend that carers are okay being the silent majority and being invisible and not being heard, then we'll continue not to make the progress that we need to. And so that was a really key thing, and that stayed true throughout the network, throughout the whole entire time that we've been working in Scotland. And I think that also means that it makes it meaningful for our carer members to be involved in Tide, and it's not just a tokenistic nod to say that we want to involve carers, because you hear words like co-production and person-centred and carer-led. They get used quite kind of flippantly sometimes, and what we really wanted to do was truly make that a reality. And what that did, along with what David was mentioning in the film, is that most of our staff members have experience or previous experience of caring. So it brought that level of authenticity and empathy to what our members were going through. And I think that also helped to build that trust and build those relationships, and really help carers to open up, to be vulnerable, which is one of the most courageous things you can do, is to be really open about your own personal circumstances, and then really look at ways that we can help them to take that forward, and ways that we can help them to impact and influence with that. And that way we're also able to keep people who they were as individuals. And that's something I'm really proud of at Tide as well, is that we recognise carers as individuals in their own right. So we don't just see the person with dementia, we see the carer as well, and we see them as a person and an individual. And again, some of the carers mentioned in the film that they feel like they've lost a part of themselves, and that's a common theme that comes through. So we wanted to say to the carers in our network that we recognise them as individuals, and that we wanted to help them try and find some of themselves again, and gain back some of that confidence and some of that connection and relationships with each other as well. And because we're able to offer a wide variety of different ways to do that, that people have spoken about today, that means again that people can have choice, flexibility, and that's really key, again, depending on what your current circumstances are. And as I said, time is such a precious thing for carers, so we want to make sure that when they invest that time with us, it's with something that they really care about and that they're really passionate about, and that there's lots of different options, so that if they can try something and it's not for them, they can try something else and keep going until they get to the point where they find that fit for them. And that's what our carers do, and that's what they do with the support of the staff members. And the last thing I wanted to say was, over this last kind of 18 months with the pandemic and all of the restrictions and lockdown, we've obviously been speaking to and working with our carers and seeing how much that has impacted on them, and how even more isolated and more alone a lot of them have felt. And I feel that one of the biggest things that we've learned as a network, and one of the most powerful things that we can do for each other as human beings in general, but also from carer to carer, or if you are supporting carers or working with carers, is that you first of all recognise them. So you recognise that they're there, you recognise the job that they're doing, you recognise all of the hard work and stress and strain that it takes to do those caring roles, that you acknowledge what they do, that you acknowledge the contribution that you make, that you acknowledge that it's equal to any professional out there, and that what they're doing is and should be at every single table in any event or any kind of making services the way they are, commissioning services, delivering services, designing services. They should be there, and their opinions and their experience, that should be held in the highest regard. And the last thing is also validating validating people is so important and so powerful and has a massive impact. If you can validate that someone's feelings, that someone's experience is normal, is okay, and is completely in response to the situation that they're in, that has a huge impact on someone. And you might not know it yourself when you do that, and you might not see it, but that will have that ripple effect on everyone round about them. And it doesn't cost any money, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it. All you need to do is say to someone, I hear you, I see you, and everything that you feel is normal and okay. And I think if we can all do that for each other, just in general, but also specifically for us through the network, if we can do that for our members, I think that that will continue our success and help us to build on what we've already achieved so far. So we're now going to take a little comfort break so that everyone can stretch your legs, go and get a tea or a coffee, or just take a bit of time away from the screen. And then when we come back, we're going to go straight into our live panel session with Anne and Norma and David. So they're patiently waiting. So if you can think about any questions that you want to ask them, then please do so. Pop it in the chat box during the break, and we'll pick it up when we come back. So we'll be looking at possibly around about 10 minutes. So if we come back about 10 to 2, we'll pick up from then. That would be great, everyone. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to the second half of today's event. Before we move on to the panel session, I just want to respond to a really brave message that you'll have seen that we got in the chat box from Isabel. Isabel, if you're still on the event, what I wanted to say was that I really appreciate your bravery in being open and honest about how you're feeling, and also that what you're feeling, you're not alone in the way that you're feeling, and also there's a lot of our carer members who are feeling that way or have felt that way throughout the whole of this last 18 months of the pandemic. So if you're not already a member of Tide or aware of what we're doing, my email address is in the chat box there, amanda@tidecarers.org.uk. If you can drop me an email if possible, I'll be able to start connecting with you and hopefully get one of our carer involvement leads to speak to you, and then we can see if there's any of our events or groups that might be helpful for you to link in with and hopefully help to support you and get you some help from other carers who are understanding how you feel. So if you can do that, that would be really great, and I hope that will be helpful for you. And anyone else who's listening today who feels similar or has some of the same feelings or experiences as Isabel, if you just give me an email, we'll be able to help you and support you in any way that we can. Okay, we're going to move on now to our live panel session. So I want to invite our panellists to come on. If you are all going to come on just now, they should be here. Hi there. Hello. So you'll all recognise them from their debut in their film earlier on. So this is Norma and David and Anne, who are members of the Tide Network in Scotland. And if you have any questions or comments for them, can you please pop them in the chat box? That would be great. But I'm just going to start off by asking you a few questions just to get the ball rolling. So my first question, and I'll ask this to Norma and David first, is that obviously in the film you spoke about how you've connected in with other carers and other members of Tide, and how important has that connection been for you to have that, build up those relationships with other carers and the staff as well? How important has that been to the both of you? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's been really important to us. I think, as we said in the film, we both feel we've learned a lot over the years of caring for several family members, and we feel we've got a lot to give. Sometimes that can be painful because when something's happened in the past, people say, well, that chapter of your life has gone, but actually you sometimes have to, nothing's ever achieved easily, and sometimes you have to just push through that. Yeah, this can actually still be difficult and can actually raise a lot of things within you that you think either you've dealt with or you've just kind of pushed inside deep down when you've had to just get on with the actual caring thing. And actually to revisit stuff isn't always easy. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're going to make a change, then you have to do that. You have to stand up to be counted both when you're caring and after you're caring as well. So I think it's really important that we just feel that to make connections with other carers is hopefully helping them, but actually I think it does help us as well, because I think it still fires us up as well that when we hear people, for instance, on the Tide Coffee Morning talking about difficulties of being in the system, whether it's in care homes or trying to get support at home, and you think, do you know how much actually has changed? You know, you've been beavering away for, you know, a number of years, and you hope that change has happened. And I think there has been change that has happened, and positive change, but we've got a long, long way to go. So I think that kind of fires us up to think, yeah, there's so much more to be done, and to be able to still connect with people. There's an instant connection, you know, although we've been involved with Tide for maybe 8 or 9 months or so, just under a year, and we've got to know people really well through the coffee morning. There's just an instant connection of that shared experience of just thinking, I know exactly what you're going through, you know, and everybody, as we said in the video, everybody's story is different. I'm not saying that everybody's story is identical, but there's so much, I think, when people through Tide do connect with each other, that actually it's amazing how similar people's experiences are, both the positive and the negative.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd like to say is the film wasn't shot in our living room. I wish it was. It was shot in a lovely hotel just near outskirts of Glasgow, so maybe one day we can save up and buy it. No, the other thing I would like to say is I think it's important, and it really, going back to what Isabel said, I think it's really important to be recognised as people and not just as carers. And for example, when we join the Scottish Coffee Morning in Tuesday mornings, and I'd really encourage you to join us, Isabel, that, you know, you talk about other things, you know, you talk about your interests, you talk about things that are happening in your lives generally. I'm a great believer that you can't give of your best unless you're at your best. You know, so I think it's really important that you do have time to have a laugh, share jokes, share common experiences, share interests. And, you know, so yes, the coffee morning has a serious element to it, which is obviously predominantly the reason why we're there. But at the same time, it's important to get to know people as people and just start to build up a further range of friendships. And hopefully that can help a little bit in dealing with the isolation aspects, particularly during COVID.
Yeah, and as Ruth said in her film as well, we've been able to connect carers across the UK as well, and we're seeing friendships building through different groups and activities that we're doing, and that's really great as well, because that's continuing, you know, in real life and what they're doing. So it's really great to see those friendships and those connections build. What about you, Anne? What's been important for you about the connection with other people?
Very similar to what David and Norm were saying. That's why I was kind of smiling and nodding. We're not upstage with a tiny fly here, so I'm not going a bit crazy. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. Similar to, funny enough, what you said earlier, Amanda, about when you were asked at the beginning, is there anything I should and shouldn't say? And I think that's really important. That's something that I think I actually asked when I put in my first, submitted my first story to you guys, was that I thought, is there anything that you don't want me to say in this? And that's the difference with Tide, from all the involvements in various places over the years that I've been involved with, is that Tide is very open, and there's no taboos, and there's nothing that we should be afraid or ashamed of saying. And I think sometimes in some environments you do feel a little bit afraid to speak your mind, but it's absolutely amazing that there's just so much. The coffee mornings are great. You share so much. It's very emotive and it's very different, isn't it? Every time you go on, it's very different, because sometimes people are in a really good mood, sometimes they're having a bit of a crisis, and everybody can gather around them and give a little tidbit of support each. So, you know, it's just so comforting. I can't express it all in a warmth, isn't it? It's so nice. Yeah.
That's lovely, thank you. We're getting some lovely comments in the chat box, Norman and David, from people who are in the coffee mornings with you and really value your caring experiences and the support that you offer and the advice that you give them. So that's lovely to see.
Yeah, we really value Caroline as well. We've got a really lovely new friend in Caroline, and we just long for the day when we can all get together and go out for a meal or a coffee or something.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I know that's the only thing just now, but hopefully in time, you'll be able to do that and meet up together in real life. That would be really great. Another question I wanted to ask you, I'll ask you first, Anne, how does it make you feel when you know that you're able to help other people, that you know that your advice, your experience, what you've got to say actually will help other carers or other people who are experiencing it, or maybe perhaps it might help professionals who are supporting carers? How does it make you feel when you're able to have that opportunity to do that?
Yeah, it's absolutely empowering because as a carer, and I also say the same to Isabel, please do get in touch with Tide. As a carer, when you're right in the middle of what I used to call a bit of a cyclone, and you're kind of getting whirled around and you feel there's no way out of it, but it's very empowering to be able to say how you feel and express how you feel, and get it all off your back, because it's very heavy weight, isn't it, David? Norma, it just all just leans on you. But no, just I feel I'd like to stand in a soapbox. That's my next project. There's so many subjects that we've all got that we're coming out the journey at the other end, although I'm still caring. The biggest part is my mother, and coming out of that journey now and just recovering. I mean, I felt I was on my knees after my journey with my mum, and I didn't know who I was, where I was. But Tide in the last year or so has kind of helped pull me together and find my feet again. And now I'm starting to get a bit angry about the situation. Just like Norma said, nothing has changed in the 4.5 years. So the empowerment that Tide can give me, I'm particularly anxious to talk about palliative care in the future. I want to raise subjects about all the problems that we have with care homes. I've been taking them on recently. Why do self-funders have to pay more than anybody else? So there's all sorts of subjects, and I feel in the last few months that through Tide I've got a bit braver and a bit more, and I've also listened again, and I thought, nothing has changed, and if people who are a bit stronger like ourselves can guide the new carers and the current carers and help them become former carers, because it is a big long journey, then yeah, Tide's been great for giving me that empowerment.
Yeah, and I've also, that's one of the things that we're celebrating today is you're all perfect examples of what can happen when you actually do the things that I was talking about today, when you actually acknowledge, recognise and validate people's experiences, because I've known you since the very beginning, when you first started, and I've seen you grow in confidence, and I've seen you grow your relationships, and asking all of you to both do the film and then to come on today and do this live event is quite a daunting thing, and not everyone would certainly think that's something they want to do. But again, through knowing you and growing alongside you as you've kind of been with the network, we've seen that develop in you. Now look at what you're all doing, and it's fantastic, and I'm really proud of you all for doing what you're doing. If I can ask you, Norman, David, how important is it to you? What does it feel like when you know that you, like the comments we're getting just now, that you're helping other people, and that what you have gone through can give people help and support in what they're doing as well?
Yeah, well, we didn't have a Tide or any kind of association when we were caring for really all 4 of our relatives. We were pretty much on our own. We were fortunate in one of the care homes where our relative lived that there was a very strong bond between the families that visited. And those connections are actually still there today, which is great. But there was really nowhere to turn. So when things get tough, or we maybe faced difficulties from within the care homes, we had to deal with that, And as Norma said in the film, we were really lucky to have each other. But there's bound to be thousands and thousands of people who don't have that, who are absolutely trying to deal with this on their own with nobody to turn to. And I think that's why we're really passionate to get involved in Tide, because we feel we can be somebody that folk can turn to, and Anne talks a lot about kind of broader issues that are happening here. I think what really challenges me is at an individual level, if somebody's struggling, can we help? And I think that would be important to me.
Yeah. What about you, Norma?
Yeah, I think for me, it's that kind of coming together of people, being part of an organisation with other carers, current carers, former carers, staff members, where you do actually all feel quite equal. You know, it's not a staff and carer situation. I think when you're caring, especially when things are really difficult, you can feel really isolated. It's a very, very isolating, and you feel you're the only person that's experiencing this. You're the only person and you are in some ways unique in how you're experiencing it. You know, and we had certainly been in a situation with a relative in a hospital setting where things had been very, very difficult. And we felt we were the only people, this thing that we'd experienced. You know, we didn't know of anybody else. You know, were we not doing something right? You know, could we have done more? But we felt very isolated in it, even though we were together. Mm-hmm. And it was only then when we then spoke to another person who was caring for somebody who had actually had the relative in the same hospital, had actually experienced exactly the same thing, had basically come up against bureaucracy, I suppose. But if we hadn't talked to each other at really what was a chance meeting, mm-hmm. we were kind of made to feel that this had only ever happened to us and we'd been very, very unfortunate. And actually, when we started to scratch the surface, that kind of became a catalyst for us. And actually, we started to scratch the surface and realise this is not an isolated incident, something has to change. So I suppose Tide and other organisations as well, they give you that sense of belonging, and that I suppose together you can do even more than you can individually, because if people, you know, there's that old adage, I think, in society in all walks of life, oh, well, you're the only person that's experienced that, so the issue is yours. But actually, if people are given a forum to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, I experienced that as well, and nothing's been done about it, or nothing's improved, that collective voice has to be even more powerful than the individual voice, as important as the individual's voice is. And, you know, for people with dementia, it's their individual voice that's the most important. Sometimes they still have that voice, and sometimes they may not be able to communicate that voice any longer. Mm-hmm. So where are the people who are standing up and saying, I'll be your voice, I'll fight that, you know, I will fight till my dying day to make that better for you and for anybody else who's to come, because that's what every human being deserves.
Yeah. And that's lovely, and I think that just again encapsulates that feeling of being together and why it's important to connect people and have that network, because you do come in as an individual person, you've got your own individual feelings and experiences, but then when you start to link in and see that it's not just you that has that feeling or that experience, that you do, and it is about, that's kind of what we've always championed, is that collective voice and that collective advocacy, because the louder it gets, the more that people will start to listen to what you're saying, and it's really important to give you that opportunity to try and get in as many different places as you can to get that voice heard. I'd like to ask you, Anne, what are some of the highlights of what you've done with Tide so far that you would like to tell us about?
I've only just got started. I'm sure there'll be many more to come. But so far, my former carers group, that seems to be my favourite place to be. I find sometimes when I go into the coffee mornings, when people are in crisis, I can still feel, I get very emotional about that because it brings back so many memories. Mm-hmm. So although it's wonderful, I'm glad that Norm and David do that, I kind of have steered away from that a little bit just now. But yeah, the former carer group's great because they're on a pathway, and it's over the country, and that wouldn't have happened had it not been for COVID. So that's been great to see people from Wales and England and all over the country bring us all together. And our ultimate is supposed to be that we're going to be doing a leaflet at the end, if it all comes together, because we all sit and chat away just like we're doing just now. We talk about experiences, and what happens is that someone who's organising the event is taking notes and quotes, and that is going to become the pamphlet and the leaflet going forward for what is now current carers, for when they do become former carers, because like I was saying earlier, there comes a point where your caring ends and everybody thinks, even your family and friends think, well, that's great, you don't have that responsibility anymore, you don't have that worry anymore. And it could be further from the truth, because that has become, you merge with the person who has dementia, and you are part of them. So when you don't have that person, you absolutely need some tips and advice from people who have been in a different section of the journey and kind of move forward a little bit. But it's very difficult, and we're all saying the journey is also very different for everyone. With my journey in the past, it was my mum and me, that was a 24/7 thing, where I kind of gave up my career, my husband and my children, not my children, my pets, and I kind of moved out the family home to go and live with my mum. And I can understand how people are feeling during lockdown, because I do remember saying right at the beginning of lockdown, all the emotions that was happening to everybody in the country and in the world, in fact, of isolation and fear, unknown, all the dread, and it all came back to me. And it was actually what caring felt like. And I had many lockdowns with my mother in her situation, where things were so bad, where you literally had to feel the same. And it is quite funny how all the emotions come flooding back to you. But yeah, so Tide has been good from that point of view, but from many other points of view, the girls that I've met, Louise and Ray and yourself, Amanda, I've not really got to see anybody physically yet because of COVID. So, you're all these virtual people, but it's been wonderful, and it's just been so helpful. And I hope, as I say, going forward, to get involved in advocacy and legislation, and yeah, I'd like to kind of go forward and help other people, like Norman Dave is saying. If a little bit of what you say just resonates with someone for the day when they're having a crisis, yeah, this feels like a great big washing machine, but it will stop tumbling eventually, and there is help in Tide and every other association that can help them, yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Norman, David? What have been some of the highlights that you've done so far?
Well, yeah, I think the connections with people, I think we've made friendships, which has been a lovely thing, that the people that we wouldn't have come across probably in everyday life. And, there's a big background of, different people's backgrounds, but everybody has kind of come together. And although we're former carers, we feel very much part of the group of the current carers who are currently caring. We try to, in some ways, I suppose, take a kind of backward role in that and input every so often into the conversation, because we're not currently caring. But I think as Anne touched on as well, it's really important for carers, when that caring journey ends, I think, well, hopefully everybody's got a caring thing built within them, So although your official caring responsibility ends, there's still something within you that wants to connect and care and make a difference. And I think as well, when your caring journey ends, I think you can feel a bit, well, I suppose a bit isolated. You're no longer part of that community that's caring. And, if you did see other relatives who were caring for people, whether it was in a care home setting, you may no longer see them, and suddenly they're all still part of the group, but you're not. So I think there's a bit that once your, if you like, official caring responsibilities are finished, there's still a lot within you to reflect upon, but to do something with, and to be given, a platform, not just to make a difference, but actually for you to be able to process a lot of stuff as well, because that's a very gradual journey. Is being able to, now, I mean, there's still probably, like most carers, most times when I think about a caring role, I'll still say, could I have done that differently? What if I had done that? Would that have made it better? Would there have been a better outcome? So that's a very, very long process that you go through. I don't know if you ever actually come to the end of that process, and actually still connecting with people who are currently caring or who have expertise in caring, or, Tide staff members. It helps you to think, well, yeah, actually that was okay, or, well, maybe that could have been better, but you can't beat yourself up about that, but you can actually maybe make that better going forward.
Yeah.
So I think it's about, as a former carer, I think Tide is giving you just an ability to be able to almost, you're talking about validation earlier, I suppose, you know, that you're still being validated in your caring role, although your caring role has officially ended, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and I think that's something hopefully again that comes through both in the evaluation and also in any of the work that we've done, is that we've tried again really hard to purposefully ensure that we hold both former carers and current carers in equal regard within our network, and we really encourage former carers to join our network as well, because like you're saying, Norma, a lot of former carers have found themselves in a bit of a void in some of the previous organisations or groups that they were belonging to or that we were working with, no longer have that ability to keep them there or to continue on with them. And we know that you bring such richness and such passion and dedication and that kind of drive to make change, that we know that's really important. And it also really does help to have you be able to mix together with current carers as well and give them that support. So it's really important to do that. And I think, we said that in previous events, that please don't ever underestimate the value of former carers as well, and making sure that they have an equal seat at any table as well. Mm-hmm. Is there anything, David, you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, for me, the absolute highlight is the Tuesday morning coffee mornings. I love it. I've grown to love the people that are in it. It's just great meeting up with folk and hearing their stories every Tuesday morning and hopefully adding something to it. The other thing that I think is important is that we've been asked to take part in some preparation of some documents, particularly the Restoring Relationship toolkits. And it was very interesting. One of those was to offer some guidance and thoughts as regards folk who are required to move their relatives into full-time care. Mm-hmm. What Norma and I decided to do was to do our responses to that completely separately. And I think Norma was looking at it primarily from the point of view of being the primary carer. I was looking at it from the point of view of being the person that supports the primary carer. And when we looked at our responses, interestingly, they were completely different. My perspective of that was totally different from Norma's perspective. And I hope that's added some flavour to the toolkits themselves. It was very challenging because it took us back to really 4 situations that we were in over the last 10, 12 years. And had me thinking, how could that have been done better? And I think the toolkit will be a result of not just our own thoughts, but lots of different thoughts about how can that be done better. And if that has made a difference and can make a difference, then it will be really worthwhile.
Yeah, and it will, and that's just another example of, activities and events that we have that you can get involved in, where you can share that experience, and we hope that will have more impact going forward. We've just got one other question, I think, just before we finish off, that's come in from the audience from Aklak. Hi, Aklak. He's asked that carers may feel a burden, but then guilt if they seek help and support kind of outside of their family. He said that feeling that sometimes they have that guilt, that it's their responsibility to look after their mum or their partner, and that he's asking, what would your messages be, especially for people who have family or cultural stigma associated with seeking outside support? What kind of messages would you give to them? And we'll come to you.
Hi, that's a really interesting question. It's difficult, and again we go back to how every individual journey is very much led by what's right for you and what's right for your family. In my case, with my mum, she didn't want any outside help or any guidance, so it had to be just myself and my husband that did that. But I do reach out to people and say, please try and get some help, even if it's not to involve the dementia patient. But for the sake of the carer, I think if you have an outside influence just to give you a little bit of support, the coffee morning is ideal for that, because it is everybody in Scotland. It's all just thrown together and all got their own little thoughts and ideas and the tips that come from the former carers and the current carers, because sometimes something comes up that you wouldn't think. And I appreciate that it's difficult when there's stigma attached, but there should never be any stigma attached to any mental ill health. There should never be stigmas attached to whether you keep someone at home or they go into a care home. It is totally individual. But please think about seeking help and getting some guidance, because it is a long, hard journey to do on your own. Please don't try to take everything on board yourself.
Thank you. And Norma and David, have you got any messages you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody would like to care for loved ones themselves, but there comes a point where it just becomes impossible. You know, you don't have the skills, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the equipment and technology to do that. And sometimes you just have to trust other people a little bit. But I think everybody goes through a very difficult transition into getting to that stage. The one thing I would emphasise, though, is that doesn't mean if somebody goes into full-time care that you're relinquishing your responsibilities yourself. And I think that's something I tried to touch on in the film, that you know, you're still very much there advocating and supporting and being involved. You know, it may even be, you know, helping folk with food. It may be getting involved in activities. I think the benefit can be if you can operate to the very best that you can in support of your loved one, whether it be directly or through a broader family network. But if there are gaps there, that the facilities should be used to fill those gaps. In addition to that, the carers themselves, the families themselves, will inevitably feel need for support and so on. And that's why I think reaching out shouldn't involve any guilt. Reaching out for help can be the gutsiest thing to do. It really can. And, you know, it sometimes takes a lot of nerves to say, you know, I'm actually struggling with this, but it's the best thing that you can possibly do. And I would really encourage the person to do that.
Thank you. Norma, would you like to finish off for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think guilt is just a big part of a care journey. I don't think there's anybody who is in a caring role that doesn't feel guilt, and a lot of guilt, but that shows you care. It shows that you're reflective, that you're trying to do the best you can, and you're constantly saying, could I do this better? How can I make it better? And I think in any family, you know, with a family member, and certainly from my own experience, I was very much that nobody could do it as well as I could. And I still believe that, because, you know, most carers, you know the person that they love and care for inside out, whether it be a husband, a wife, a mother, a father, a daughter, a son. They know that person, and that's probably, I'll join Anne's soapbox for standing on it and saying, listen to us, you know, we know the person more than any other expert claims to know them, listen to me. But I had to learn along the way that sometimes other people could do things at some stages that I couldn't do. And that was hard for me, because I like to be in control. And actually I had to say, well, do you know that in this instance, we can complement. I can do something here that you can't do, and you can do something that I'm struggling to do. And that's the best scenario, whether it's care at home, care in a care home, is to be able to partner with other family members, to partner with care at home experts, to partner with care staff in care homes. If I got on my soapbox, that would be my next bit in the soapbox is it a true partnership? Well, I think that leaves a lot to be desired from everybody. But I think if you are caring for a family member, it can seem easier to just do it all yourself and do it because you know then it'll be done right, and that's what the person wants and that's what you want. But that can also have serious repercussions when you realise, gosh, that I've got to the stage, there's some things I can't do, and this could be a dangerous or a difficult situation. I have to be able to say, we need to partner together in this, whether it's another family member, and that can be difficult as well. But yeah, I certainly think if people feel guilt, I would say to them, don't worry about that. That is a perfectly normal, and I suppose in some ways, as long as it doesn't get out of control, guilt can be a good thing because it makes you question and it makes you reflect. But it's part of a care journey, I think, guilt. But the thing is to do with that guilt is to, the things that didn't go well, I think, as we said, is to learn from that and say, well, you know, but my husband, David, was a great adage at the time of saying to me, and still says to me, you did the best that you could at that time, on that day. You cannot go back and beat yourself up about, what if I had done this? What if I had that? You acted with the best interests of the loved one at that time, at that current time. And yes, everything's a learning experience, but you have to accept that you did the best that you possibly could, and you have to be at peace about that, I suppose.
Thank you, and that's a really great message to finish on. So thank you to all of you. Thank you for being part of the filming process, and thank you so much for coming along today and being so open and honest and willing to be part of this and the celebration of Tide. And don't worry, all of you will still keep your soapboxes there. We'll give you lots of them to get on, and that's what we can do in the future. There'll be lots of things that we can continue to do and achieve as we go forward. So thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
No problem. Okay, we're just coming towards the end of our event now. So what I'd like to do is introduce Arlene Crockett, who is the Director of Evidence and Influencing for the Dementia Programme with the Life Changes Trust, who are our main funders in Scotland, and we were talking about them throughout today's session. And I'd just like to hand over to Arlene to close the event for us and chat a little bit about the investment in Tide in Scotland over the last 4 years. Arlene, hi.
Thank you, Amanda, and many thanks to Tide for inviting the Trust along today to say a few words. I have to just quickly reflect on the afternoon so far and say a highlight for me, amongst many others, has to be the film by Anne, Norma and David, who just articulated so well the impact on their lives of being members of Tide and the difference that has made to them to be able to share their learning as people first and then as carers, and to be connected to others in a similar position, and then have the support to be able to push through when sometimes they maybe feel that they've not been able to. And David, I have to say, you've burst my bubble. I was going to email you to see if I could get a wee tour of that house in the film because it was absolutely stunning, but I'm sure your home is equally as lovely. So as Amanda said in her introduction today, in 2017, the Life Changes Trust awarded a 4-year grant of just over 1.3 million to the Life Story Network to fully establish a national Tide network for carers and former carers of people with dementia accessible throughout the whole of Scotland. As well as this was that practice and learning developed by Tide in Scotland would then influence more broadly the network established by Life Story Network across the UK. It has to be said, at that time, this was the single biggest amount invested by the Trust into one organisation, and so was considerable, especially as we put enormous trust and investment into a relatively new charity at that time. What was appealing to the Trust was Tide's plans and how they would support carers by delivering a carers development programme, which has been mentioned several times today and yesterday, being proactive at engaging carers at a local level, as well as building awareness and promotion of the network with existing organisations and other agencies in Scotland. Tide was unique, and that was referenced by Ruth earlier, in how it would challenge perceptions of carers, campaign for better support, influence policy and practice locally, regionally and nationally. They also focused on what carers needed to help themselves, the importance of peer support, which has been referenced many times by Anne, David and Norma, and educating others on the important role carers have and continue to have in Scotland. It was about empowering and bringing carers together whilst building their capacity. This needed an investment of time from both Tide and its members. The Life Changes Trust saw Tide in Scotland as having the potential to be a leader and a shining light for carer engagement and development in the UK and beyond. Investment in Tide has not been a rolling investment in carers at the Trust. To date, we have benefited more than 11,000 individual unpaid carers in Scotland through the projects we fund, for example, the By Carers for Carers programme of work and our recent Caring for the Carer Fund, whose learning report is due to be published very soon. You can find out more about this from our website and from our monthly e-bulletins. We will also publish the outputs from the events over the last few days by Tide, including the report by the University of the West of Scotland that Amanda has mentioned before, very soon on our website as part of the evidence base we have from all of our funded projects. It's been so good to hear about the impact of Tide over the last few days from carers, using the films and the animation shown, from the panel discussions that have taken place yesterday and today, and also from staff, as well as the findings reported in the independent evaluation by the University of the West of Scotland against the outcomes set by Tide. Tide have done some great work to really change the way in which carers are viewed, engaged and genuinely involved in what matters to them and have the support to do so. But there have been challenges too, which many organisations in Scotland have faced, and Tide is no exception. What will be really important now for Tide is to build on the work it has done over the last 4 years, including the toolkits and resources it has developed, as well as taking the time to focus on the findings from the evaluation by the University of the West of Scotland. The report by UWS, as it's known, provides a strong evidence base to do all of this alongside an established and committed staff group, as we've heard many times, under the leadership and expertise of the Tide lead for Scotland. Tide in Scotland has achieved many things since the Trust awarded funding in 2017, and we really look forward to seeing what emerges from them now and in the future as they continue to flourish and grow. Sorry, Ruth, I stole that one from you, so thank you. As a leader and shining light for carer engagement and development in Scotland, the UK and beyond. So again, many thanks to Amanda and to Tide for giving the Trust some time at the end of today's event. And we look forward, as I say, to seeing what comes next for Tide in Scotland. Thanks.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you to Life Changes Trust for giving us the opportunity to start Tide in Scotland. And as you say, we're looking forward to the future and the more things that we can achieve as a network and the more carers that we can start to reach out to and engage with in the future. So thank you to the Trust and thank you for coming along today.
No problem. And thank you, Amanda, because your leadership has been exceptional and you've really taken Tide and the vision from the start and developed and established it so well. So thank you for your leadership too.
Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you very much. Okay, that's us come to the end of our event today. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has participated in the event today. Again, a big thank you to our carers, to Norma, to David and to Anne. I want to say a big thank you to Gordon, who is behind the scenes here doing all tech for me and making sure that everything runs smoothly, and he's been a great support. And also to my Tide team in Scotland, who have also helped with various aspects of bringing this all together, and they're working really hard, and in particular to Rebecca, who's our digital comms officer, who's done a huge amount of work in helping to do editing of some of the films, and that's been no mean feat, and she's very good at what she does. So thank you to Rebecca for doing that. As I said, everything is available on our website. The links are there. If you go onto our website, you'll be able to find the evaluation report. You'll also be able to find our events page, which gives you details of all of our groups, events, webinars, training, anything that we're up to will be on there. You can book on to any sessions that you want to attend. You can also sign up to get our newsletter, which comes out every month, which tells you everything that's happening, gives you updates in Tide, both in Scotland and across the UK. And if there's any in particular questions or queries or anything you want to talk about in a more one-to-one basis, then again, please just email me. My email address is in the chat box. It's amanda@tidecarers.org.uk, and I'll be able to chat with you more and then signpost you to the relevant members of staff or the relevant activities and events with Tide. So thank you to everyone. I hope you've enjoyed today's event, and I look forward to seeing some of you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.